Good morning. Welcome to Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotion with me, Pastor Amanda. We are looking at Acts chapter 27, down to the last two chapters. And what we find is that we're reminded that at the end of Paul's testimony with King Agrippa, he appeals to the emperor. And so what happens is they then have to transfer Paul from his location to Rome. And so lots of sailing ahead. So what we find here is that he is then put into the hands or the responsibility of a centurion named Julius, who watches over him, and they embark upon a ship. And what we find is that Paul is actually still traveling with companions, because we've got that wonderful that we set sail, we went here. So we know that whenever this was happening, he wasn't completely solitary in his support system. Throughout everything he's going through, Paul always has people with him, and he knows that they're with him. And I think that's important for us to recognize that when we think about our spiritual journeys, and maybe why some people seem to be able to get through hard times easier than others, because there's a difference in knowing that you have people with you versus not really sure. In Paul's deepest, darkest times, he has friends who are visiting him. He has friends who are checking on him. He always has people who are ready to take him into their homes. And his traveling companions, they go with him. They are there with him. So he is constantly being encouraged by those who are walking with him on his journey. He didn't do this in isolation. And I think it's important for us to know about our ministries too in the church. We are not meant to do ministry in solitary. We always need to have companions. We need those that we are mentoring and those that are mentoring us to join us on the journey. And we see this. Now, it's not put a lot of attention on, because I think it was just assumed that this is how it's supposed to be done. And so they didn't need to talk about it. But something that maybe we need to start relearning in our process of being on this journey together. So here they go. They're setting sail, and he just kind of talks about the trip along and kind of how it's rough waters and it's not doing so good. But at one point, they find themselves at sea in the middle of a storm, and they're having to throw things overboard. They are really kind of in a tough situation, and they're like, we need to abandon ship. And of course, what's kind of interesting is prior to this storm, Paul has said, this isn't a good idea. We don't need to be setting sail. It's not going to be good. But of course, who's going to listen to the guy that they have in prison? They're not listening to Paul. They're listening to everybody else. So the ship goes out to sea and the storm hits. So of course, we have at about verse 21, we have Paul who stands up, and I love this. Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete, and thereby avoided this damage and loss. I urge you now to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. So, Paul having to do his little I told you so, and yet at the same time, he's there to comfort them and encourage them in this stormy journey. And he says that, God has told me that I will stand trial in Rome, and that whoever's traveling with me will not lose their lives. So be encouraged. And so what he does is as they kind of keep trying to figure out where they're going to land, and they kind of get themselves stuck in a little bit of a shipwreck. But at the same time, Paul's like, let's eat. We've been kind of on a starvation diet for a while. Let's eat, get our energy back, and then we'll get ourselves to the land as it comes. And that's kind of exactly what happens. They've gotten themselves enough energy to keep moving forward, and they get themselves onto land. And all 276 persons are saved in this time. And yet the ship itself then does not really make it. They're going to actually have to tear the ship apart to get some people to land safely. And it's interesting that part of the motivation in all of this is that the centurion wishes to save Paul. Because at some point in time, the kind of before they all get to land, the sailors' idea of saving themselves was to kill the prisoners, kind of all for yourself. But because Julius in his position, and see, he's kind of starting to connect the dots of what Paul is saying, what's happening. And so actually everyone is saved in this situation. And so it's just kind of this, experience that they have together, and seeing Paul always seeking to save life in all situations, no matter if they've got him in prison, if they have beat him, if they are Paul is always seeking to save life. And I think that's something that we have to be called into question too. Are we always seeking the life of the other? Are we always seeking to save the life of the other? Or are we more concerned about our own life? Right now, this is one of our big discussions in our country. Are we like Paul, always seeking to save the life of the other? Or are we like these shipmates who are like, save yourself and whoever else dies, dies? Gives us a moment to think. Because here we are getting, Paul could have ran. Paul could have saved his own life. But that was not what was important to him. What was important to him was saving all the lives of those traveling with him. I'll just let it sit there today. I think that speaks huge amounts to us in this time. So thanks for joining me, Pastor Amanda, with Hope, Faith, and Joy Daily Devotion. Tomorrow we will conclude Acts. And from the responses I've gotten so far, it looks like next week we're going to head back to the beginning, to Genesis, one of the most amazing dramas I believe that we can go through. It is so packed with fun. It's fantastic. So I look forward to next week as we go back to the beginning, and have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow.